Today's episode was brought to you by Wild Bill's Fireworks, PopChevy.com, and the Kent Rose Foundation. This episode is also brought to you by TheForkEnd.com. Today we welcome our special guest, Blake Chancey.
Welcome back, Harold.
Thank you, Russ.
We have a really great guest today, somebody we've both known for a long time. You've got a rich history with, who has had a great career in the music industry, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of great stories to share. So here we got Mr. Blake Chancey here today. How about that?
Man, what about that? I don't know how rich that is.
I
but
think you are slumming.
We do have a history.
Yes, we do.
Yes,
And he and Brian have a good history too, so this ought to be
we
pretty
do.
good.
Ours has nothing to do with the music industry, though.
Well,
And I've signed several declarations that I won't repeat any of the stories.
Well, Blake has been on Music Row I know since the 80s. I think we probably met early 80s, but I knew his dad.
Another
Ron,
legend
who produced all the Oak Ridge Boys' great records, and I go even on back with your dad, Ron, because he was one of the first two men that would let me in his office when I first started coming to Nashville. So he had a company, Chartwheel Records.
Cartwheel,
They
yeah.
had Cartwheel,
yeah.
Cartwheel, and they were on the chart, so I guess it could have been Chartwheel. But anyway, they had Rub It In.
Yeah, Craddock and
Billy Crash Craddock.
Johnny Carver.
Johnny Carver.
Had a handful.
And actually, at that time, Dale Morris, Alabama's manager for a lot of years.
Was the
but
promotion, yeah.
His office and Joe Talbot were the only two places Nelson Larkin and I could get in to play people music. So I go way back. So I've known Blake for a long time and have a lot of respect for him.
Thank you.
I never grew up, but we kind of stayed around together for a long time. He grew up, but,
Dad,
we're so happy that you could be here today, Blake, and be on the Behind the Shed podcast with us. And we're going to talk about you and Music Row and how you got into music. And
sure.
And I know you've been a successful producer since I left, but we want to talk about that also. So with that, tell us about how you got started.
Well, you were mentioning my dad. He started in the music business when I was about 5 or 6. A guy named Harold Bradley took Dad to his first session. My dad was a traveling salesman, and his best friend was Harold's brother-in-law. So Harold took Dad to an Owen Bradley session and caught the bug.
Yeah.
But everybody in our I grew up in Madison, which is right outside of Nashville, and everybody in Madison either worked at a factory or was in the music business, like a guitar player for Hank Snow or whatever. Like across the street, Maybelle Carter lived across the street from me, and I honestly didn't know anything about her because it was during the period before Johnny Cash showed up. So they weren't that busy. So she was a nurse, or she was like a candy striper. So I didn't know that she invented country music. You know what I mean? And our backyard touched Brother Oswald, who was in Mr. Acuff's band, and Bob Moore, who was in the A-Team, Lightning Chance. I don't know if you ever worked with Lightning.
Yeah.
Who was the crazy guitar player that played on all the Owen Bradley stuff, but he had a car wreck? I cannot remember his name, but he was a real famous guitar player before.
Did he play with Merle too?
Maybe.
Is that the guy?
He ended up
Not Hank Garland.
It was Hank Garland.
Hank Garland.
Yeah, and he lived like at the corner, and then the Scruggs lived one street over, and it's just music everywhere. So that's what I kind of grew up in, but I thought that was normal, right? So then Dad went to work for Buck Owens for about a year, and then Buck's sister came And while Dad was at lunch, she changed the locks.
Oh,
So he was out of work.
yeah, I remember her. She's a nice girl.
Yeah.
But she wasn't nice that day.
No, she wasn't. So Kelso Hurston, who you probably
yeah.
knew, helped Dad a
Yeah, I
bunch.
knew
And that's how the
Kelso.
cartwheel thing happened. It was a penny stock for some farmers in Lower Georgia that wanted to start a label. And Dad talked him into hiring him. And then he was at the Idle Hour, which everybody remembers, I think, now. It's an
Yeah.
old iconic honky-tonk.
Hadn't it resurged again?
It's moved three
There's been
times.
three different ones.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the original one was right next to Dad's office, but Dale Morris was walking down the street, and Dad was sitting on the front porch, and he had just gotten this gig.
He was a salesman also.
Exactly, and he was really upset and was telling my dad, they just met, and said, "I'm moving back to Spartanburg, South Carolina, I think is where he's from." And Dad got to know him and said, "How about you want to be head of promotion for a record label?" And that's how that started.
Yeah.
And then Dale said, "Man, there's this guy that paints houses back home, but then he sings at the VFW, and all the girls just go crazy over him." And that was Billy Crash Craddock.
Wow.
So then they signed that, and they have all these hits, and it's so much luck involved in what we all do, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of just growing up around it and watching my dad go through all of that, So it was real interesting.
Wow.
So,
Did your mom and dad ever talk you out of the music business?
yeah, well, they tried. My dad really, really, really tried.
Yeah.
And when I turned about, I think 14, I got a job at a gas station, and the guy at the gas station was a live sound engineer. So he started taking me to gigs, and then his dad had a heart attack. It was for Steve Davis. Do y'all remember Steve Davis? Take
Yep.
Time to Know
Yep.
Her?
Yeah,
was
sure.
his
His
big
brother
hit.
Costo.
And Costo, who
Yeah.
played with Alabama
Oh,
forever.
yes.
Yeah, remember that?
Yes,
So
yeah.
I ended up getting thrown into that gig to work sound, and my mother, I made her drop me off down the road because I wasn't old enough to drive, but I didn't want anybody to see my mother dropping me off at a club. It was called Jay Austin's, and it was underneath the Bluebird is now. Wow. So I went in there and worked sound, and it was packed, and then they took a break, and then there was 2 people left. And I could never figure it out. Well, the cocaine dealer in town was the bass player. So everybody had to pay to get in. So he would help them at the break, and then everybody left. So I always thought that was interesting. But I got the bug then to be an engineer. I just remember going, this is awesome, and I want to do this. So I started going on the road and working sound I was in high school. Started doing frat bands and country bands and rock bands and everything. And I went to college, promised my mother I'd get a degree, but I thought I was going to be this world-famous engineer until I met one. A guy named Chuck Ainlay.
Yeah, I know Chuck.
Remember Chuck?
Yes.
He was at the place called the Castle.
That's right.
And he was going to work for Bowen. And so they brought me in to be his replacement. And I watched him for 2 days. And then I went, I can't. It'd be like a golfer watching Tiger Woods or something. So you can't, there's no way I can do this.
Right.
So I went to my dad's boat, which I have now, Jackie and I have, called the Elvira. And Dad was sitting on the back of the boat with Bob Beckham.
Another legend. Here we go.
And they'd been on the back of the boat for a minute, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
They were in the sack a little bit. And I start going, Dad, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm 24, but I've been doing this for 10 years. That's a long time, I was like, I have really messed up. And Dad goes, you don't want to be an engineer anyway. There's a ceiling to that, whatever. And Beckham said, son, I'm going to hire you. And we would go to Beckham's house every other weekend and eat a meal, and then they would come to our house. Beckham had this huge family. And I remember looking over at Beckham, and I said, well, what do you do? And my dad said, you are not my child. There is no way. And I said, well, I really don't know what they do. He's always around the house, but Beckham just laughed, and he said, son, I'm a publisher, and this is... but I wasn't around publishers. My dad was always at a record label. I didn't know it. And I just thought these people were all Dad's friends. I didn't know they were trying to get a cut. You know, I didn't even get that whole concept. You know, Dole Brown, I'm sure Dole's been here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Dan Wilson and
Yeah.
Ronnie Gant and every publisher in town would be at our house, but I'm sure they were at your house too. You know, you find out later that they were at everybody's house, you know, trying to get a cut and everything. So I went to work for Beckham after that, and that was my entry to the music business.
That was a great start, too.
Yeah, God, he was
A
crazy.
restart.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
Beckham was one of the premier publishers in this business.
He was really good.
Of just not even a handful, maybe 3. You know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Small
wow.
club.
Yeah, very small. Yeah.
He's a combination of foghorn leghorn and the Tasmanian devil. It's like the same. Could not, but he would smoke 2.5 packs of cigarettes every day. He would drink a fifth of something, either scotch or vodka. And then every morning he would get up and he thought he was running a mile, and he was running 4 miles. And he did that, he did that for pretty much his whole life.
Wow.
And I don't know how he did it,
I
because
don't either. I didn't know that.
when he ran, he would run up to you. Dennis Lindy and I one time drove the route, and we saw 4 miles, and we couldn't believe it, you know. But he ran in the snow, in the rain, and when he would walk up to you, it smelled awful. You could smell scotch and nicotine and all of this stuff coming out. But I tried to get him to quit smoking cigarettes. And he said, son, I can't quit anything or I'll die. Right? So, but he was a great guy to work for.
I bet he was.
Very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
What a great teacher.
Yeah, man. No kidding. So you got in the publishing business then. You started working for him, plugging songs, I guess.
Yeah, but part of that whole, in the plugging business and being the great mentor, he would drop these nuggets all the time. He one time said, son, your job is to stay out all night long and hang out and find out information and feed it back to me. And I said, so you're paying me to go out and have a good time and to do all of this? And he said, yes, son, but you got to bring me information. He goes, I want to know what Harold Shedd's doing. I want to know what Jerry Kennedy's doing. I want to know what, you know, Bud Logan's doing. I want to know, you know, and he'd start rattling off everybody. So you would have to go figure out how to get in with these people.
Right.
And the first one I did, I remember Beckham invented the pitch sheet for Scott Simon's dad, Cy Simon.
Oh, yeah. I
Cy
didn't know that.
Cy lived in Springfield, Missouri, so he would come here to pitch songs like every couple of months. So Bob would compile all the information, so when he came to town, he would know exactly where to go. And then all of a sudden people started going, can I get a copy of that? Can I get, you know, and that's what kind of turned into the pitch sheet.
Wow,
Didn't
way
know
to go.
So, you know, all that being said, I'm looking at the pitch sheet and I'm looking and it says RCA Records, you know, and it's, I think the artist's name was Paik McIntyre.
Yeah.
It was Rebus.
Reba's
Right.
brother.
Right? And it says produced by Mark Wright.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like, well, he's not going to see me. So, but they would list all the people that were looking for songs. So the last one listed would be the low guy on the totem pole.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it said Chuck Bedwell.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know. So I have to pick up the phone, call the front desk at RCA, and I ask for Chuck Bedwell. Hello? And I say, hey, Chuck, this is Blake Chancey, you know, gave him a bunch of bullshit, you know. And he goes, well, yeah, man, let's go hang out. What are you doing after work today? And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm off to the races immediately. You know, I'm just starting this gig. So I go meet Chuck at Maud's. Maud's Courtyard. That was the commissary for the music business. And Beckham had a tab there, so all I had to do was sign my name. And I took Chuck there, and he said, man, you need to meet. And he started introducing me to everybody. Chuck was the person that really introduced me to a lot of people, like Joe Scaife, who ended up being like my big brother. He truly would drag people along to meet and everything. So that's kind of how I got my plugging started, was
Right.
figuring out who.
We, you know, Chuck's part of this sometimes, and we've laughed a lot about, you know, Chuck worked everywhere.
Yeah.
because he always got fired, but he knew everybody because he'd been everywhere. So,
Yeah. Well,
He literally, Beckham invented the pit sheet. Yeah, and Chucky stole it. But Chuck got fired one time, my favorite firing story, which I've told with Chuck on the podcast. But he, for some reason, had to open the trunk of his car. Is when he's working at Famous. And he opened the trunk of his car, and there were like 80 cassettes that were made out to where they were supposed to get dropped off. It was like a month and a half of songs that were supposed to get pitched. And he had his trunk open, and his boss walked up and looked in the trunk, and he's like, Chuck, it's hard to get a cut if you're not on the date. And it was like all of them were in there. And then that was his last day at that job. I think that was Hurt. He worked for
Henry?
Henry Hurt, yeah.
Yeah.
that's funny, but it's interesting how, everybody kind of has a similar path,
Well, he was a connector for a bunch of
Oh,
them.
yeah.
Great
Okay,
guy.
so you were there at with Beckham.
Yeah,
working, so
and Beckham, and then that was during the era of everybody's buying everybody up. So the guy that owned, Beckham owned like 40% of the company, and Fred Foster owned 60%. And Fred had some financial trouble. had a run of bad luck and had to file bankruptcy. And Combine was the only thing they had that was really worth a lot of money, so they had to sell it. And Marty Bandier and Charles Koppelman ended up buying it, and who I worked for a while. And you hear good things and bad things, but they were always good to me, and I learned a lot from them. They had some interesting ways of doing business, if you will, but they were good to me. And then it became, after that, it was SBK. Stephen Swed came in with all this money, and they bought CBS Songs and combined that with Combine, and it became SBK, And then they sold it to EMI and somehow ended up on top and ended up continuing to run when everybody thought we were all getting fired. So then it became EMI. So that was my publishing run before I went to do the label thing.
Right. So when did that end? When did the EMI thing end, and how did you move on to label stuff?
I had started producing. In fact, Joe helped me early on. I'd started producing for our production company, SBK, and Joe, I hired Joe and didn't know I was supposed to hire Cotton too. Right?
See what you started?
So I hired Joe, and because, I've got X amount of dollars making this project, and I walk in the studio, and Jim's just sitting there. And I wasn't expecting that. And I walk in, and I get this kind of look on my face, and he knows that I don't know he's going to be there. So I pulled Joe outside, and I was like, "Hey, man, what's going on here?" And he goes, "Man, I can't come to a studio without him with me." He goes, "All you got to do is pay me. You don't have to worry about it." But he's coming too. And at the end of the first day, Jim looked at me and he goes, "Hey, Blake, thanks for the shot, man." And that was their line they did to me for the rest of their lives. Every time we get to the end, they'd stick the knife in on something,
That's great.
But I started doing some production, and I'd come across a few things, and I would get them to a spot, and then they would give them to a different producer because I'd never produced a hit before or anything, right? And then finally, this one girl, Joy Lynn White, I had done all these demos on, and they were really unique, and she had gone in the studio, and the guy that went in as the producer, it didn't work, I guess, basically. I never heard those sides, quite honestly. And so the head of A&R calls me and says, "Hey, man," I'm sorry, I've got it backwards. So the producer that did it called me up and said, "Hey, man," and we were friends, and he goes, "I'm really excited. I've decided I want you to co-produce Joy Lynn White with me," and it was for CBS. And his name's Paul Worley. And I was like, "Oh my God, man, thank you for the opportunity." so great. And I hung up the phone, and 3 minutes later, Steve Buckingham called and said, Blake, I want you to produce Joy Lynn White. And I said, well, I just got off the phone with Paul. Yeah, I know all about it. And he got real quiet.
Uh-oh.
And he went, no, I wanted you to do it, Paul. And they got into a little, but it worked out so much better for me getting to work with Paul because he became a dear friend, but also we got to work together and figure out each other's strengths and weaknesses and that sort of thing. Yeah. So Paul goes to work at Sony. They blow all those people out. And I was working with this artist named John Bunzo, and I was trying to get him a record deal at the time, and I had everybody on a flight to see him play in Seattle, and bad weather happened, and we all got stuck in some small podunk town in Texas. I had to share a Motel 6 room with Doug Johnson and Sam Ramage. And all these people were there, but one guy from Capitol went to Chicago and got out to Seattle, and they said, man, we want to sign this guy. And I told the artist, I said, you don't want to sign there because either Mr. Bowen's going to have to produce you, or one of his guys are going to have to produce you, or you're going to have to be published by him. And right now, none of the three are like that. So he's going to sign you, but then it's going to be torture. And then Mr. Bowen found out that I said that. And I got called to the carpet yet again and had to go to Bowen School and watch him make 2 records. But the day John Bunzo signed his deal, Renee Bell took me out she was the head of A&R, to a restaurant, crying to tell me Bowen wants me to fire you immediately, which I knew it was going to happen. And so the next morning, I was upset. Next morning I come in, Paul Worley calls and says, hey, can you go to lunch? I said, yeah. And we're sitting at lunch with Paul Worley and Scott Siman, and Scott Siman goes, how much? And I said, 4. And Paul goes, I said, I have no idea what we're doing here. And Scott goes, you hadn't even talked to him, Paul? And he goes, sure I have. And I said, I really don't know what you're talking about. He goes, you want to come be head of A&R for Columbia Records? And I went, well, sure. But this is so apparently Paul talked to somebody about the job, but it wasn't me. I think he forgot or just changed his mind. I don't know. But I ended up getting that gig, and that's what kind of started my record career. So I came back, and Celia came in. She was my boss. Remember Celia Froley?
Yeah, sure.
She's great. She came in, and she was like, I'm so sorry about what happened with Bo and Blake. And I said, I'm over this shit. I quit. And she goes, what? And I went, no, I'm joking. I just got a job offer to go do this. So it worked out for everybody. It was a win-win-win for everybody. Except John Bunzo. That record did not work out.
That did not work out.
It did not work out.
Today's episode was brought to you by Wild Bill's Fireworks, PopChevy.com, and the Kent Rose Foundation. This episode is also brought to you by TheForkIn.com.
Too bad. There's always casualties along the way.
Yeah, man. I always hate that, too. But.
Okay. Yeah. So you've been in publishing all this time now, and you're trying to make records, and you get a job at a record label.
And I was already making records.
But you had gone to, that's what I mean.
Yeah, I did, David Ball.
That's right.
Is the first song I ever had that went boom, and that was before I went to the label.
Right. Yeah, okay, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But now you're shifting, to me.
Was that the Thinking Problem?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Great record.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
But it was that. It was
way to go, buddy.
A blind hog finds an acre.
I forgot. That was a great record. I forgot about that one. Yeah, man. So now you step into record label business. How's that?
I didn't care for it much. It wasn't like your situation at the record label, or I assume yours was good, or anything like my dad's. Yeah. Everybody hung out and went on vacation together and everything. This was a little more aggressive and a lot more serious than, But, I mean, I'm very thankful that I got to do that for the 10 years I was there and all the things, and it changed our life, but it wasn't, I'm not sure I'd want to ever do that again, Yeah. It wasn't, some people want to do that, and it's like, I'm good,
Yeah, you went through some of that, too.
I did.
He did.
Sure did. But it was all good.
Yeah.
It's good. I learned so much. There's one day I spent with you that you won't remember that I learned so much from you, and it was one of the most special days that I remember in my head. You had bought a slip at Cedar Creek Club.
Yes.
You were moving your boat from Kentucky Lake, I guess, is where
Gunnersville.
Okay, you were moving it from somewhere. But Joe Scaife calls me up and says, "Hey, man, can you help Harold move his boat when he gets to Old Hick or when he gets downtown? Can you help him get it to Cedar Creek?" Because he knew all of how scary it gets up there and real tight, and I'm always on the water, and I was like, well, absolutely, So I canceled everything, and you were at Rock Harbor. You'd made it that far, and it was like 8 a.m, and I walked up, and I tap on the window, and you pop out, and you're like, "Hey, Blake, what's happening?" And I was like, I'm ready to go. Do you need me to go in the bilge and check all the, the engines and everything? He's like, "No, sir, I got it all. Just help me with the lines right now." And I was like, "Okay." So you fire it up, and I'm getting the lines, and we start moving down the road, and then somebody comes out from downstairs, and I was like, oh, forgot about it. Didn't know that. Sorry.
New artist.
Yeah. And, and I was sitting there, and you're like, "Get Blake a cup of coffee." And I was like, "Okay, sweet." So we start riding, and we're going, and you said, "We got to make a stop downtown, Blake." And I was like, "Okay." So we're riding, and you're kind of, getting a little cup of coffee, right?
Yeah.
And I said, "Do you mind if I ask you some questions?" And you went, "No, I'm fine." And I said, "What made you sign KT Osland?" And we're just the two of us up on a fly bridge, and I'm drinking coffee and driving, and he said, "Well, Blake, those songs were incredible." And I said, "Well, yeah, they were, but wasn't she like late 40s?" And you were like, "Oh, yeah, but those songs were so good." And I thought to myself, why wouldn't I give the radio listener one of their own?
Yeah.
And I went, "What does that mean?" You said, "Well, the listener is a middle-aged housewife woman. Why wouldn't I give them one of their own?" I was like, wow. I wouldn't have thought of that. And then I keep going. I go, "Toby Keith, what made you sign Toby Keith?" And you said, "Well, I was flying to Texas a bunch, got some investors you had in a building or a studio, I don't know." And you said, and I kept having to fly down there every month, and there was a flight assistant that you kept talking to, and you said she wasn't being that too nice to me, but I kept talking to her, and then finally one day she said, "Hey, one of my best friends' husband is an artist, and would you mind listening?" And you said, "Yeah, if you'll put your telephone number on the cassette so I can call you back," or something like that, to that effect. And you said you threw it in your car seat, and you were driving for a couple of weeks, and then you were going to the airport, and you said, "Oh, God, I'm going to see that girl, and she's going to ask me about this singer." I didn't even listen, and you told me you popped it in, and it was "Should Have Been a Cowboy," and it was all these rattling off, and you said that, you told me, "Yeah, I got on the plane."
It was 3 number ones and 2 top 5.
No,
Isn't that crazy? And you said, and I got on the plane, I was like, "What's this guy's number, and how do I get a hold of him?" And all of that. And I was just like, how much luck is involved in what we do?
Yeah.
I mean, how lucky is Toby Keith that you just happen, that whole situation happens like that, It just blows me away. And then you told me about Alabama, Larry McBride and all of that. And you were telling me all of that. I remember asking you, "Well, who at RCA actually signed them?" And you got this grin on your face, and you said, "All of them." I said, "That's smart too. Write that down. Give everybody credit, So we were running down, and you'd gone through the Headhunters, and you'd told me about Shania and Billy Ray, and you'd gone through, and I'm just shaking my head, because one's luck, but that many is not luck. That's called talent,
Yeah.
So we're getting there, and I said, "So we're stopping downtown?" And you said, "Yeah, we've got to get some food on here, and I've got a stereo getting put on the boat, and I've got all this stuff." And I'm thinking, what is going on? Joe didn't tell me anything, right? So we pull up downtown, and some more people got out of your boat that I didn't know was down there. Other friends, publisher friends, if you will.
Yeah. As it were.
And they get in a van or something and drive off, and then they bring in you put a stereo on up there, and you brought in food, and they brought in all this booze, and you were at the label, and you were getting ready. You had the whole promotion staff and marketing people, and we were driving down the river, and you were playing them, presenting them music that you had recorded that they were going to get to work later on down the line. And I thought, what better place to get people excited than in a fun, have a drink, whatever else. And this next song is Shania and Mutt did this thing, and you'd crank it up to 10, and the whole boat would be shaking, and everybody be doing this, And I remember we got to Old Hickory Lock, locked through, and I can't remember if we went to the Hendersonville side or the Old Hickory side, and everybody got off, and all the gear went off, and everything went away, and then the last 10 miles, you and I did it alone, and I remember riding up there with you, looking at you going, that was one of my favorite days of all times. And I used all of that boat trick. I used that a lot. I've used all of those.
Oh, great.
That's great, man. That's cool.
I wonder how much mileage can you write off on a boat? If you're driving your car, it's like 80 cents a mile. I want to know what it is.
It doesn't matter if you have a ride-off. It was so much fun.
Yeah,
that was
it
a
was.
ride-off. Yeah.
No kidding.
That's great. You got to be there on some of those good occasions.
That one was awesome. That was a
Man.
great day.
That's so cool.
And one of our great trips, you might have been on this trip, was when we had the New York staff down, and we took them out and all had a great day. And then they didn't want to go to L.A. or anywhere else. They wanted to come back to Nashville.
Well, that might have been those people. I can't remember.
might have
It
been.
probably was.
Because it was a hell of a party.
Russ knows all about that.
Yeah, that was wild.
That's cool, man. That's way cool. Wow. So now you're at the record label, though. I want to go back to that because you have to do that job, too, because he wore that hat.
Let's talk about you.
Let's talk about you.
Yeah. So you're at the record label now. You've been a hands-on publisher, which is a creative job and a business job too. You've been in the studio. You've made a hit record. Now you having to take care of the label stuff at the same time and deal with all that. So tell us something about that. And you jump in here anytime you want to because you've done it too and you share.
I'm enjoying it.
When I first got there, Columbia Records was kind of the wasteland for everything that anybody signed. They ended up on Columbia because there was no head of A&R at the time. So whoever signed anything was on Columbia first, it seemed like, before it was figured out where to go. So I didn't, as a producer, didn't have anything to do for a year and a half. And I learned that I needed to learn the record business pretty quickly. So Scott Simon and I flew around to every branch and hung out and would take him to dinner and party and rock with him. And I had learned a trick from Jimmy Gilmer. He was a great publisher. But he called it layering. And I would go in to the bartender and I would say, hey, look, every other drink, I need it to be just soda water and a splash of cranberry. And sometimes more than that, because I would always be the last one standing at all of these parties. So it got to be, hey, Blake can rock. And that was a total, I was pulling the Dean Martin trick, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Scott and I would go meet everybody. So everybody would want to stay up all night and whatever. But what I figured out is from Harold, watching, if you get to be friends with these people and get them super excited about something, when it really matters and you need their help, they'll step up for you because they feel like your friend. Like you said, they want to come to Nashville. They don't want to go to LA and stuff. Right. It's that same thing. They want to hang out with the Nashville people. So the first couple of years, I really worked on relationships other than in Nashville, outside, trying to, become everybody's friend. But also song-wise, I listen to a lot of songs, and that's another thing the boat's good for. I could pull out in a cove and go through a couple of hundred songs in a day, especially during the email era of listening to music. The cassette one was a little. My father did that. He was sitting on the back of his boat, and I pulled up, and he was listening to songs for the Oak Ridge Boys. And he'd been on the back of that boat for a minute, and he would listen to this cassette, And he'd go, piece of shit. And he'd throw it over his shoulder, right, thinking it was sinking. And we went to leave, and I looked out in this cove, and all these cassettes are doing this. And every one of them said, to Ron Chancey for the Oak Ridge Boys.
Floating their way to Hendersonville.
So we had to dive in and, pull them all back in. But listening to songs was really important. And I'm not sure there's a lot of listening going on these days. From a label standpoint, it's more partnerships and stuff now. But cutting an outside song and listening to everybody's songs and trying to know everybody's catalog or being able to say this songwriter's really good, but man, if he wrote with this person, and just trying to become a part of that community. Because in my world, I was stuck in a bubble of the Combine guys and then the SBK guys, just like the Tree people or Sony people were in a bubble. And I went to Jerry Kennedy's Celebration of Life recently, and it was all the Welk people. And you just realize I don't see a lot of these people, and I never really did because they were in their own little world. I saw Dole, but everybody ran in their own little their own little thing. So I was trying to meet everybody and get back in. So I did that for a while, and I was trying to develop new acts and sign new acts and trying to get something going before they fired me,
I got you.
Because they're always looking for a way to fire you.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the listening like that and how much everybody listened back then. We've had several conversations about that here, Harold would come in, you were in his office, and I've said it a million times, he had that great big box and his desk was up to here, always listening. Always. And I guess that happens today. I don't know, but I wonder. I don't know.
It should happen today.
Well, it's a lot of partnerships. They're waiting for people to be up and going, and then they want to call you and be your partner. And then if they can help, maybe. But it's being an A&R person in this day and age is a lot easier gig than it was, because we're betting on something. It's like you're betting on the headhunters. They're signing something that's already working.
Yeah.
So there's no real risk, because if it doesn't work, you get fired. But if it's already working, then they're not going to fire you. It's already working. So it's a little bit easier of a gig right now.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
Way to go.
Yeah, man. So you were mentioning Natalie Maines today when we were talking about Blake coming and all that, and hearing that. I have to go straight there because the Chicks were so big. What was it that you heard? You were talking about when you interviewed him on the boat. What was it about this and that? So what was it when you heard like the Chicks that you went, wow, that's it? I mean, how did that happen?
Well, when I signed them, they had a different lead singer, which is bizarre.
Yeah, it is.
Natalie was not
in the group, no. It was a girl named Laura Lynch. Long story condensed. I went to see him as a favor because Scott Siman owed a favor to the manager, Simon Renshaw. And I told Scott, look, dude, I've already passed on them twice. I have no intention of signing them, but I'll take a trip to Austin, Texas any day of the week. I was going to go stay for the whole weekend. I was going to, woo. And I went to see them with Laura Lynch at the Broken Spoke. I don't know if y'all remember the Broken Spoke. It's like, so I remember they're wearing these cowgirl dresses, just totally goofy. And they're up there playing, but every time I would look away and just listen, I'd go, you know what, maybe something here, maybe. And it was during the era of Kathy Mattea and Susie Bogas and Emmylou Harris. A lot of the female singers, a lot of the melodies were more linear. There wasn't as much range as it turned into later. And I'm not saying those people couldn't have sang those kind of songs. I don't mean that way, but it was just the kind of songs that were being recorded. And I thought, well, maybe they can fall into that. So I cut some guitar vocals with them I think in Austin, Texas. And it was pretty good, but I wasn't like going, oh, or anything. And about a month later, their manager came to me and said, the girls want to fire the lead singer. And I went, I've heard of firing the drummer, right, or the guitar player, but but the lead singer, really.
Seems challenging.
Yeah, and he said, well, they've got it down to 2 girls, and they want to get it together, and then they want to present it to you. And I was like, well, okay. So 3 or 4 months later, I went to Austin again, and they were playing a bar called La Zona Rosa. Mm-hmm. And Natalie came out and singing, and she had this, I'm colorblind, but I think it was green, like a green Azot sweater, and her shoulders were all padded up, and she looked like she really didn't have a neck. It was so bizarre, and she had this real short haircut, and she's up there singing, but she was singing really hard and really good. And I thought, it wasn't like, I didn't hear the, I didn't hear the angels sing, but I was like, Scott and I had already given him the worst deal in the history of recorded music. And I was like, why wouldn't we just continue on? So then I went in and did 3 or 4 demos with them, and I went, wait a second, now this is getting pretty good. And Scott was working with me at the time at Sony, but he'd already been let go. So nobody knew that I had them signed in Nashville, because Scott was head of business affairs. The deal was done through New York, and now everybody was gone but me. So I just wasn't saying anything about any of it. And Paul Worley was my boss, and I'd never even mentioned that they were signed or anything, right? And I'm sitting on a promotion call, and one of the regionals said, I went to a show last night, and they introduced the artist as Sony recording artist. And I just remember thinking, uh-oh, what just happened? And she goes, Nancy Richmond's the girl's name. She goes, and they were called the Dixie Chicks. And Paul's looking over at me like, what? And do you know anything about this, Blake? And I'm just kind of, and then she goes, and they were incredible. They killed it. And they were all going, we want the Dixie Chicks. And I was like, And Paul goes, what's going on here, man? And I said, can we talk about that after this meeting, And so we went up to my office, and I played him those 3 or 4 things, and he was like, oh, my God, that's really, really, really good. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I know. So that's when we pulled the trigger and started figuring that out.
Wow, unbelievable.
Good move.
I
love that.
Well, again, total luck.
Yeah.
Different lead singer.
Not exactly, but some luck, yeah.
Different lead singer, total, but yeah. It worked out. It worked out.
Yeah.
You got the right one.
Yeah, we got lucky. Yeah.
And you heard it.
Yeah, well, I did hear it.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for Kevin Welch. The song was Till I See You Again. I don't know if y'all ever remember that. It was on his solo record for Warner Brothers, and it's such a hit. And in the demos, I engineered the demos myself. And I already told you I'm not a good engineer, right? Yeah. So I thought that would go on the record until we pulled it up after we'd cut the record. And Paul looked at me and he goes, man, that sounds like shit. And I went, man, I know. And he goes, we don't have time to re-record it. And I said, well, we'll get to it the next record. And, you don't know something's going to do that. I thought it might have some success, but not. Yeah. Not go off like that, So I still apologize to Kevin.
When I heard Wide Open Spaces, I knew I'd missed one,
Right. Boy. Yeah.
That was, you made some great records.
Thank you. That song was originally 5 minutes and 50 seconds long. Wow. Originally. Wow. Yeah. And that was the big argument. I was trying to get her to cut another song, and she didn't want to cut it. And I said, well, you know what? She goes, why don't you just do that thing you do? Cut some verses out or choruses.
Edit,
that
do
thing,
some editing.
Doing all this stuff, And I said, well, I'll tell you what. I'll give it a shot if you'll cut this other song. She goes, I'm not singing that other song. And I was like, that's the deal, And we kind of negotiated that, and they both ended up being huge,
What was the other song?
There's Your Trouble.
Oh, yeah. That's a pretty good one.
There's Your Trouble. That's a great one.
That's fun.
She told Jackie, my wife, if I'd known it was going to be that big a hit, I would have tried a little harder. But,
Yeah. Now I understand they're back together. Is that correct?
well, they're out touring, making some money. They're going to go. In fact, I'm supposed to go see. They're doing opening some stadium shows for Tim McGraw this year.
Oh, good.
So I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going to go see one of them.
Is Natalie still the lead singer?
She's still the lead singer, and they all.
She's an incredible singer.
Yeah.
I agree.
Great
She really
style,
is.
great voice, great delivery.
And very unique.
Go, man.
Yeah.
go.
Well, I hope that all keep moving.
Keep moving.
Yeah,
Let me
man.
go to the mailbox. Keep singing.
Yeah. That's always good. Yeah. That's cool. Well, what a funny story. I didn't know all that.
Me
What a
either.
great
Yeah.
story. Wow.
Which is, of course, why we do the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we never know.
You never know.
That's why we had a job. Yeah.
Yeah. So if the Chicks weren't enough during that period of time, what else were you working on? I mean, that's pretty much all.
Harold will test. My dad always talked about slots from an A&R perspective because I was raised at record labels. Dad started at Cartwell, and then it was ABC Dunhill, and then it was ABC Dot, and then it was MCA. So I was always around him in the A&R process. And if somebody could be just great and walk in the door, and he'd go, well, I've already got 2 of those.
Yeah.
So he was always looking for a slot.
Yeah.
Right. So I had this slot I was looking for. I wanted to find somebody that wasn't afraid to get in trouble, that would be the last one standing at the party, or be the one that was always getting in trouble, the outlaw slot, if you will. And John Doris Sr., Johnny Doris, yeah, you remember Mr. Doris?
Yes.
He kept wearing me out. You got to go see this artist play. It's just right across the Kentucky line. And I was like, who is it? And he goes, it's Montgomery Gentry. It's Eddie Montgomery, who is John Michael Montgomery's brother. And I was like, man, I don't want to work with another ballad, I love you, I love you, I love you artist. I don't have that slot, so I'm going to pass. And he goes, oh, you hadn't even heard it. And I was like, well. So finally one day he said, man, they're going to be playing just right across the Kentucky line. Will you go? So he basically kind of told a little bit of a lie. It was Lexington. We crossed the Kentucky line and kept going. And I was with Cliff Aldridge Sr., and we were riding in a car, and I said, hey, are we getting off the exit here? And the driver says, we're going to Lexington. And Mr. Doris was just looking down. He wouldn't even look at me. But I went into the club, and I think it was called the Grapevine or something. But Estill Sires, did y'all ever know Estill?
Estill, yes.
Oh, my God. What a piece of work. He was a used car salesman. I don't mean that in a bad way, but he was always selling, So I walk in, and he's like, Blake, Chancey, how are you? And I was like, good, sir, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, you're going to love these boys. These boys are going to be bigger than the Beatles. These boys are going to be bigger than the Rolling Stones. And he just kept going and going and going. And I kept looking around, and this guy's looking at me, this big, big guy in an orange coat. And this girl comes over and drops a Jack Daniels, a Jim Beam and Coca-Cola, which I don't drink that stuff, right? I drink beer or something, and drops it down, and I kind of look at it, and I look over, and this guy looks at me, he's huge, and he points at me, and I go, thank you, and whatever. And I sit there, and Estill's still going, these guys are going to be bigger than George Strait. They're going to, and I'm thinking, that's kind of weird. And I kind of push the drink over, and then the girl drops another drink. And I said, where'd that come from? She points, and this guy was wearing a bear coat, and he was huge, and he points at me. And I realized, I'm not going to get out of this place alive, So Montgomery Gentry comes out, and it's the loudest thing ever, and they're all amped up, and the crowd's going crazy, and they're playing the first song, and they go, boom, and it ends, and the whole place turns around and looks at me. And I know I did the old...
Yeah.
And then everybody starts clapping, right? And I knew I'd been suckered in. This was a total setup, right? So get through the show and I go downstairs. John Michael's down there, and I meet them. And he's like, if you sign them, I'll put them on the road with me and all this. And I was like, oh, that's great, So we got that 3.5 hour ride back, right? So I'm in the car, however long that is, and Mr. Doris is just looking down. And he goes, "You're not going to do it, are you?" And I said, "I didn't say that." I said, "I didn't say anything. I'm just sitting here, Cliff. Did I say anything?" And I said, I can't do what they just did. I said, but I get the look and everything, and there is a slot. But this is the slot, and I told them what it was and whatever. And I said, and I'll give you a song, and y'all can go record it, and I want to hear it, right? And so they did, and they brought it back, and they did like a guitar vocal or something of it. And I went, hey, that's pretty good. And then, but I didn't have time to do it at the time. Everything in my life was going that way, and I had zero time, but I really believed in this idea. So I brought them in, and I said, if you guys will commit to rocking and partying and getting in trouble and flirting with every girl you see, and they were looking at each other, and Troy Gentry says, I think I can do that. And Eddie's like, I'm already drinking all the time. That's perfect, So the head of our label at the time had a friend that did some sides on it. It did not work out. And it had made him real cold on even keeping them around. And I was way too busy. So I called my friend Joe Scaife. And I said, Joe, here's the deal. And I laid it out for him. Here's what it's got to sound like. Here's what it needs to be like. It's the kind of songs it needs to be. This is the deal. And he goes, well, it sounds like it was invented for me. Yeah. And I said, well, yeah, pretty much. So Joe did the first 2 records, and then something kind of got a little squirrely or something at that point. And then I took it over at that point and figured out what had happened is one thought that he should do one style of song, and one thought the other should do a different style of song. And it had become like too many records, 5 sides with one guy, 5 on another, and it was like kind of didn't go together. So I kind of came up and I asked them, they had passed on like 5 huge songs like Cowboy and Me and some others, and I asked them, well, why'd you pass on that song? And he said, well, there's too many words, I can't sing that many words, and it's too high for me to sing in the chorus and all this. And so I came up with the shtick of Eddie sings the verse, Troy sings the chorus, and split the song, and made them both have to do the thing. And then the first song we did on that batch was My Town, and that thing went, it launched them into being like a platinum artist. So I was always really proud of that, because we made up that thing. Sure. It was completely made up. So
yeah, man, that's cool. It damn sure worked.
That did work.
Yeah, man.
And I was getting to produce Mary Chapin Carpenter, which I was really, her songs are so incredible, and that was all working out really well. And so I was doing various things, but at the record label thing, sometimes you have to make things up. You have to, meaning the people come in from New York and they go, you're going to be 1 million units short. None of you are getting your bonuses, and some people are going to get fired unless you come up with something, So you go home and you lose sleep and you try to figure out something that hadn't happened, and lo and behold, something falls on you like a tree and it works,
Yeah, man.
So,
boy, and did it. Wow.
It had, I think the biggest made up, I don't mean it like that. That doesn't sound right. But I was in my office, and Scott Simon, this is years after he'd left and whatever, comes into my office to play me something. And I'm sitting there, and he plays me, the song was Broken Wing. It was a karaoke version of Martina McBride's Broken Wing. And I remember hitting stop, and I said, man, that girl sings her ass off. And he said, that's a 10-year-old boy. And I said, oh, we can't do that. We can't do that. And he said, but you liked it. And I said, well, I do like it, but I can't. we're not going to record a 10-year-old boy. That's not going to happen. And he goes, will you at least go see him play live? And I said, well, okay. So we went to Rhode Island, and he was opening for Alabama. His name's Billy Gilman.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right?
Little Billy.
So it was in Rhode Island, and it was governor that ended up going to prison for being so corrupt. He's the one. He came out and introduced Billy, and it was in one of those things that turns, one of those circular stages.
Yeah.
Because I remember Randy had vertigo or something, or had some issue, and he kept getting sick. He would make them stop the stage, and he was sitting down and playing. I felt so sorry for him, but Billy killed it. You know, never let a dog act or a kid act open for you, because they always win, right?
Yeah.
So he killed it, and so I ended up going, all right, I'll sign him. But every promotion staff at our label is like, we do not want Billy Gilman. And quite honestly, I understand who wants to promote at that time an 11-year-old boy or 12-year-old boy. But I remember sitting in my office and going, guys, I don't know if this is going to work. It was me, Don Cook, David Malloy, and Scott Siman all in my office. And I said, I don't think this is going to work. We got to come up with a song that's bigger than the artist or something. This isn't going to work. And Scott goes, wait a second. And he picks up his cell phone and calls his daughter Rosie, his oldest daughter, and says, can you send me that thing you've been passing around at school? And she faxes it to us, and my assistant Deb made like 4 or 5 copies, and it was something written. It was right after Combine. Is that am I saying that right?
I think so.
Combine and the shooting, the school shooting.
Columbine.
Columbine. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not good at that stuff. And it was from the perspective of one of the kids that had been killed, and it was like, I'm in heaven, and it's great up here, but don't feel bad for me. But if you, be nicer to each other. And it was this whole story. And I remember Don Cook looked up and he goes, I can write this. And David Malloy goes, not without me. And so they wrote that One Voice song. This One Voice was heard. And I cut the track while they were in the other room writing the lyric.
Wow.
And all I said to the band was, try to make it sound as close to a Beatle, Imagine, John Lennon kind of thing. I remember Greg Morrow's pulling out tape, and he's taping up his drums, and everybody's doing that. And we cut that track, and we cut it, and nobody seemed real excited about it at the label, but the PR people pitched it to Oprah. They went crazy over it. Next thing you know, Billy Gilman's on Oprah singing One Voice, and we've got this video. It was huge.
I remember.
And it was like, and I felt bad for Billy because he was so young. When you're that young and something happens, it's really hard to keep going. You know what I mean? So I always felt bad about that. But everybody at the company was happy because they all got their bonuses, and it all worked. And
The Billy bonus.
the Billy bonus.
Yeah, it's good to know it's there.
Yeah, so that all worked out for him. But, just stuff like that you come up with.
You know what's important, though, and again, it goes back to what you've talked about so much to me, is every one of those things, nobody else had one of those. Mm-hmm. You had the only one.
Well, it's like with the Headhunters. That's what you told me. He said, I've never seen anything like that before, But that was the only one, right?
I believe when he first saw him, where was it? Where'd you see him first?
Douglas Corner.
Douglas Corner, that's right, because you said to Larry, we got to stay and hear this next band.
Yeah.
And Larry Shaw was like, why?
Yeah.
And you said,
I told him, I said, well, first of all, it's the ugliest band I've ever seen.
that's funny.
But to show you how that works and how instantaneous it can be, I guess that's a word. They got on stage, nobody said anything, and they said nothing. They just geared up and went into Only Daddy That'll Walk the Line. I thought, we're going to hear a bunch of cover songs and stuff. And they segued from that into Walk Softly on This Heart of Mine, the old Bill Monroe classic. And they got to the chorus, and the harmony came in, and I turned to Larry, and I said, I'm going to sign this band. And he said, you going to do what? I said, I'm going to sign this band. And I did.
And it worked.
Yeah, it worked out pretty good, too.
It worked out, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was easy. They had 8 sides cut already. And I gave him 20 grand. I said, go do 2 more sides.
I remember Mike Bradley was the engineer on that stuff at
Yes.
Soundstage.
Soundstage, yes.
And the reason I remembered, I was there visiting somebody else, but I walked in to say hi to him, and I met the band, but everybody was tired and kind of starting to drag a little bit, and I've never seen anybody do this before or since, he took a lighter fluid and put it all over the console while they weren't looking, and threw a match, and the whole console starts up in flames. And boy, they all woke up.
Are you
jumping
kidding
around.
me?
I'd never seen anybody do that before.
Oh, me either.
Wow.
Yeah.
It burns off and then it's fine. But I
Yeah.
was thinking, what made him do that the first time? And
Right. What did he practice on?
yeah, no kidding.
Maybe he's got an old TIAC at home.
He went to a Jerry Lewis concert.
That's right. Jerry
That's
Lee.
crazy.
Oh, God, that's awesome.
That's nuts. So after you left, you were Sony for 10 years?
It felt like 30, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was 10 years.
Sounds like something you'd say too. So what happened next?
Went home for about a year, I guess, something like that. I had just signed a contract for a long time, and they were going to have to pay me for a long time and getting all that worked out. So I ended up being home for a year. And Jackie, I think, suggested I go back to work.
Or go somewhere.
Exactly. She was tired of me being home.
Go to work or buy a condo somewhere.
So Scott Siman called me up, and we were talking about something, and he asked me to come, and he had a publishing company, and it wasn't working out at the time, or he didn't have time to watch it. So I ended up renting a room back at my dad's old studio that Dad had sold, Westwood, and I had the upstairs, and it was called RPM Music, and I did that for a while and kept producing, and an independent publisher for a long time, and then we ended up moving back downtown over close to the Music Mill, and had another studio there, 815, and we were there. The studio was called Disgraceland.
Yeah.
My best friend, Dennis Lindy, who is a great songwriter.
Incredible. Another legend.
Well, I did all of his demos for 20 years, I
I knew
guess.
that. I'm glad you brought it. I was going to ask you.
Well, we can talk about that. But every time he would see a Velvet Elvis, because he wrote Hunka Hunka Burnin' Love was one of his big hits.
Yeah.
He would buy a Velvet Elvis, he would buy me one. So then when Dennis ended up passing, the ones I didn't already have a duplicate of, Pam, his widow, gave me all of those. So we had them all hanging up in the studio, and it looked like 1970 MGM hotel. So we started calling it Disgraceland Studios. It was built around a bar, and which was a really bad idea, by the way. And the idea of building a studio around a bar is a good idea, but it doesn't work.
No.
It does not work.
Fun, though.
But that's kind of how I got into doing. I forgot where I was, but you were talking about Dennis Lindy.
Yeah, well, I knew you'd done all those demos.
Well, that's Beckham. Beckham.
What a great way to learn working with a writer like that.
Well,
Oh, my God.
Beckham always was, all the crazy Beckham was, he was always way out front of most people. And Dennis had, I don't know if it's a disease or what you want to call it, but he couldn't be around people. He hated it, and he hated being dependent on other musicians, and he was a musician and played on a lot of records and produced Christofferson and Newberry and a bunch of people, but he just didn't want to do any of that, and he didn't want to depend on anybody for anything. And Beckham knew that I knew how to do all this MIDI stuff and back early in the day, which is the most tech boring thing in the whole world, but I had gotten pretty good at that. And so Beckham immediately made me go. Beckham comes to me and he says, "Son, I've decided you're going to go build a studio for Dennis." And I said, "Well, Bob, that's not really something I'm really excited about or I want to do." And he said, "Let's try that again, son. If you don't go do it, you're fired." And I said, "Why don't you just start with that? Why don't you just say, I'm going to fire you unless, So I go out to Dennis's house, and who's the greatest guy in the world. We were already friends. I didn't even know what Dennis did for a long time. He was just always at our house, and we always watched the Andy Griffith Show. And I had a guy that would cut all the commercials out, and it was like a drug deal. He would show up, and all my friends would show up, and we'd all be giving him cash, and he'd be giving us a new batch, and Dennis became a part of that. So we started working together, and I started going to his house, and we were doing, it would take us 6 weeks to do one song.
Wow.
So people go, he doesn't write a lot. He only does like 8 to 10 songs a year. And like, that's all we can get done. We're working constantly.
Wow.
But it got to a point where it was like shooting ducks in a barrel. You know, I'd call somebody as soon as I got done with a song and be driving into town and go play it for them. And, you know, it got crazy. But Dennis was very bored a lot, and he had a great imagination. So the first thing we did is we came up with fake names for all the fake musicians that were playing on these demos. Even though it was all programmed and it was the two of us, there were fake. The bass player had a name, the drummer, you know, everybody. It was the Happy Redmond family, and it was inbred family from whatever. But Dennis, in the process, had come up with a fake town. And it was called Norwell, which was his middle name. And it was based on, I went to a funeral in East Tennessee for Joy Lynn White, and there's this people called Melungeons. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. They were some of the original people that came over on when our country first started, but then they disappeared, and supposedly they ended up in East Tennessee, and they crossbred with Indians and African Americans, and their eyes were a little closer together and all this stuff. And literally, we're 4 hours from here, and I went into a store, and I couldn't understand anybody. I felt like I was in a different country. Mm-hmm. It was so bizarre. So I'm telling Dennis Lindy about this, and he goes up there and does research and comes up with this fake town, and then the fake town had fake businesses and had fake people working in them, and then he started writing songs about them, and that's where Bubba Shot the Jukebox came from, wow. Goodbye Earl, John Deere Green, Sure Is Money. I mean, there's 30 hits out of all of that, but they were all written about this town. I've got the map still up in my studio, in this fake town. The guy was a genius.
Yeah, he was.
Complete genius.
Yeah,
so,
man. Damn. That's so cool.
It got so easy getting his songs cut for me at one point that I called Barry Beckett, who was in the studio with Eddie Raven, of all people, I think. And I called his assistant, Becky, I believe was her name, and I said, hey, it's Blake. I just finished a Dennis song. I'm coming to town. Well, you know, Barry's in the studio right now, Blake. And I said, oh, that's cool. I just promised him I'd call him when I got the song done because he wanted to hear this when I'm working on. He was next to hear it first. And she goes, hold on a second. She puts me on hold, and she says, he's at the Omni. He says, come straight in right now. So I walk in to the control room, and he's got Eddie Bears. He's got Michael Rhodes. He's got Larry Byram, who I haven't seen in forever. Mike Lawler. Remember how he'd always play with his hair? Crazy Mike Lawler.
Mike Lawler.
He's still around. Y'all need to get him. You need to get him on this. But I remember I walked in and I handed him the cassette, and Mr. B looked at me. He says, "Is it a hit, Blake?" And I said, "Yes, sir, it is." And he hands a chart to Michael Rhodes and says, "While we're listening, would you just go ahead and chart it?" And they did, and they cut it before he'd ever heard it. That's how easy it had gotten with Dennis.
That's awesome.
Well, I mean, Dennis was that good.
Yeah,
I mean,
he was
that good, but it got really easy there for a minute.
Wow, that's so cool. Wow. Yeah,
God.
that was absolutely brilliant. That's crazy.
That's a music real life.
What a great,
Right?
Yeah, man.
great stories.
Yeah. Well,
Blake, great
Yeah,
stories, man.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
So what are you doing now?
Right now, I live over in West Meade, and we have Walter Campbell. We bought Walter's house about 8 years ago because our daughter was switching schools and whatnot, and Jackie redid it. And, excuse me. And so in the process, there's a separated garage. So I turned that into a recording studio, because when we did that, you couldn't have a recording studio in Nashville in your home,
Right.
in Davidson County, or they would
Right.
bang you upside the head financially. So we kept it looking like a garage, but it works great, and I work out of there generally. But like I just did a record with Randy Hauser, and he lives 5 doors down, and he has a studio at his place. So we just go from his house to my house to his house, and you get all this gear after all these years, So working with Randy, I'm working with this band called The Woods that's kind of self-contained.
I know them.
And they all play everything. We all can do everything. And it sounds very much Laurel Canyon, Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, Linda Ronstadt, Jackson Brown. It's kind of got all those elements. And if they were artists today, they would be country artists. Everybody goes under, that format doesn't exist anymore, But so just working, man. I've been in the studio a bunch. This girl named Casey Bruner I'm working on right now. She's like his 22-year-old hairdresser that is on a label called Electric Feel, which is an independent label that Post Malone and Post Malone's manager own or whatever. And but she wrote a concept record, the year in the life of a single girl in Nashville, and how sucky it is. So it starts with her going out and having a good time. Girls are going out, and then it goes into meeting the guy, and then the guy turns into a piece of shit, or is promising and then a piece of shit, and all this. It's literally.
I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? I keep forgetting that we have mics.
Literally, and it's a concept record. It's one of the few times I've worked in something where they said, "Here's the first single. Can you go record it?"
Wow.
Isn't that weird?
It is.
I've only had that happen
I'm
one
already
other time.
interested in hearing it now. It sounds cool.
So I was working on that right
Yeah.
before we came here, but I'm doing that and just, making music and
Still creating stuff.
still creating and wanting to go to the boat is what I really want to do, but,
Well, I'd like to go with you.
you can. The old Elvira's looking good, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Now, here's what people really want to know. Your boat, what kind of boat did he have?
It was a wood cruiser, but I can't remember the name, the brand of it.
The brand was Trojan.
Oh, it's a Trojan,
Trojan.
okay.
Gorgeous boat.
Yeah, awful name for a boat.
It is, well, it was a little on the nose for you.
So I named,
Easy.
to get away from that, I named the boat Fascination.
That's right.
Fascination, right? How long was said boat?
45.
45,
Yeah,
nice boat.
mid-40s.
Okay, great. Beautiful.
It was a cool boat.
That's
yeah.
a great boat.
I miss the old music business.
I
God.
Me
do
too.
I miss it so much.
Oh my God.
Well,
We had such fun and so much success, and everybody loved everybody, and everybody got along.
Yeah, they're
I
trying.
miss all of that.
Yeah, they're trying a little bit, but not to the extent, COVID was interesting because, everybody's all the way. But then I realized during COVID that apparently I've been socially distancing for about 20 years. Because nothing really
Because
changed.
nothing changed.
Not
Exactly.
really.
Yeah.
I went back in that room and started doing my shtick,
Yeah.
and realizing that's part of the problem is everybody can work in their own room.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of hanging out, and there's not a.
You don't have to go anywhere.
That's
Yeah.
right. And the like this new artist I'm working with right now, for her, it's interesting because she's 22, and they wanted to do a real country traditional session. So they came to me to do it. So I had a fiddle player, I had a steel player, I had a piano player, a utility guy, electric guy, drums, everything on the fly, And they were, all the people that are writers and stuff were sitting in the control room and whatever, watching just in shock.
Right.
Because they'd never seen that before, and I'm doing my normal bullshit. It's like, hey, I need you to play here, and I need you to take the, you know what we do, and it's, and they're all looking at me like I'm, like, how do you know how to do this? And
Like
it's
you're launching the space shuttle.
Right, And for her, she writes a song with somebody, and they give her back that night a somewhat finished demo.
Yeah.
she handed me a guitar vocal, and I was like, thank you. I prefer that, And so when we cut the song, she was just like, oh my God, that came out so good, because they're not used to, they get these finished demos and everybody's sitting in their own room or their bedroom or whatever doing their thing. And now with AI, everybody's a writer now, and they're sticking it in the thing, and you can hear it's good. But it ain't like great yet. But give it about a year, and it might be, or 2 years. And these guys are writing songs, and they're putting it in there. One artist I work with, and he'll say, "Give me 10 versions of this idea," and then he'll get 10 and go, "Ooh, number 8. I like that. I'll take that, and I like that from 6." And then he'll keep refiguring his song, and then we'll go in and record it. But he uses it as a creative tool for ideas on different ways to approach a section of a song and stuff. So it's crazy,
John Willis was in here this week, guitar player.
Oh yeah,
and was talking about that and the evolution of everything. And he said I think I may be exaggerating, but half his work, rather than just playing on a record, is people bringing him tracks and saying, I want you to replay this better. Play this stem. I like what they did, but whatever,
Right.
So
it's I'm not doing that yet. I probably will figure it out because I've always had to figure out whatever it is, but it's, so there's not a lot of camaraderie now. Think of all those demo guys who are playing demos all day long, and that job's gone.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know a lot of Jackie's mother's music that she wrote, Melba Montgomery. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law have been taking a lot of those songs and that never got demoed and putting them in and going, and it like gives songs a new life.
It's pretty amazing.
To pitch.
Not perfect, but it's pretty amazing.
But it's
you're right.
It does. There is a good thing. It does, but I don't see it being gloom and doom.
Nope.
When we started middying, everybody's like, "Oh, you're going to ruin the world."
It's the end of it, yeah.
No, not really. So,
there was a lot of guys who used to go ahead.
I think at some point that wheel will turn on around, and it might not be the same, but it will be a recreation of some of that. Mm-hmm. I remember when we first started the mill, when you were first coming around. Well, some mornings I'd go in, Dean Dillon and Frank Dicus would be sitting there writing a song. And how you doing? Oh, great. And Dicus was one of our greatest fans. He kept, every day he'd say, something good's gonna happen here, and you miss that part.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The camaraderie and everybody. I remember at Beckham, every Friday, Beckham wouldn't send writers' draws to him. He made everybody come in and pick up their check from him in person. So every Friday, all the writers would show up, and Beckham would just start handing their checks to them. And then he'd say, "What'd you write today? This week, son?" And in front of all the other writers, they would have to sit and play everybody the same things. You could see people get all nervous, or you'd see them get very competitive and want to, well, if you wrote that, I can, let me play, And there was something about Beckham making them come to the office and being a part of the family, if you will.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
So,
There's an interesting swing happening now already, Harold, where I know I've got a son that's 28, and they only, he won't stream a movie. He only buys them.
Huh.
And the reason he buys them, and it's the same reason I see such a surge in vinyl. Or, they're buying vinyl records, right?
They are.
And you get a swing back, like you were talking about. It's like, no, I want to actually own this thing. I'm tired of paying, whatever it is, 25, depending on what plan you got, a month to Spotify to have the privilege of listening to the radio in whatever order I choose. And he's doing the same thing. They're downloading. The reason I know all this, and I ask him about it, is because he's still on my Amazon Prime account. So I can see everything he buys, and I'm like, "Are you And this started about a year and a half ago, and are you buying those?" And he's like, "Yeah. What if I want to watch it again? I don't want to pay for something twice." I'm like, "Interesting." Said, it's kind of like that whole thing of telephones.
Yeah.
Before you know it, kids will actually use telephones to call one another and talk.
Yeah.
That could happen in America.
Yeah.
But I think there is an important thing there. That human element, it was like, there was a meeting. Frances Preston had all of us come to town years and years and years ago when I was in LA already, and we came back and we had a meeting at the Lowe's where she had sort of declared that CDs were going to ruin the music business.
Yeah.
Right? Compact disc had come along, a perfect digital copy of every record ever made was going to be put into a neighborhood, and they were going to make 100 cassettes, and no one would ever buy music again. Yeah. Right? And instead, all my songwriter friends got a big bonus when everybody replaced their cassette tapes with CDs. I'm hopeful that AI does, in fact, become a tool that we use. But the reality, what you were talking about, I'm fascinated by that because young lady goes in the studio and watches what happens when musicians play together. I just don't think we can AI it. I don't think we can AI it. I don't think you can AI Dennis Lindy. I don't think you can't AI a guy out of whole cloth saying, I'm going to create a city of inbred weirdos from East Tennessee, and I'm going to write 30 number one songs about a made-up city.
Yeah.
Right? You could tell AI that, but somebody's going to have to tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
Yep.
I just think so much of that.
They're going to have to create emotion
Yes.
first, and then you can do all of that.
Yeah. It'd be really interesting to see.
But like now, I get calls, and I want you to, Mr. Shedd, I've written a song. I want you to hear it. And I said, okay, send me a CD. A CD? What is that?
Yeah. Exactly.
But that's the old world
Well,
I'm from. But see, I still like to play my CDs.
Yes.
Well, they still are selling those again. They started back
I still
up.
buy DVD.
Yep.
It's coming back. The CD
It is.
I hope it does. It's a great format.
It is.
CD
And
was
record-
after cassettes. Man, what a step forward!
Oh.
But it's still a great format.
Yes, it is.
CD is,
Things are changing.
especially for us old guys.
Yeah, it is.
I'm in.
Things are changing so crazy now.
And writers can help change all of that, and producers, But music has been around a long time, and we've all seen it evolve from big bands through rock and roll and country and pop and rap and all of these different kinds of things. But it's a new generation now. Like, I don't have any listeners. All of my listeners they're dead. So it's got to be recreated at some point because it's too good to leave behind.
Indeed. Right.
And it's what started everything that we do now. So from that standpoint, and with you younger guys that have your own ideas and you have the talent to do all of this stuff, you unknowingly maybe sometimes will even recreate some of the good stuff. That's my story.
I can only
I get
hope
it.
so.
Yeah, man. I think so.
And I'll be 95 by then.
Way to go, man.
He's almost there.
I'm looking for next year.
That's right.
That's great.
We need to find Harold an act to do. He's looking for something.
Okay.
You should go do something with him. It'd be fun.
It would be.
fun.
Where you live? Let's get the address real quick.
But that would be good.
Yep.
I'll give you my number that's
The one that works.
I don't owe anything on it.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
They're not going to repo this one.
All right, kids.
Man,
I'll
thank you
never-
so much.
This is my last thing. I never forget. We were talking about Jim and Joe. Jim Cotton, I brought him to Nashville from Memphis. And when I went to Mercury in the late 80s, 88 actually, and so about 90, when we started making some money, I bought everybody in the office a computer. So I was in the studio one day talking to Jim, and this is '93, and I said, "Well, Jim, I know you guys, you and Joe have been ahead of the game, but I'm going to tell you, I just put everybody at Mercury a new computer in the office." And he looked up and said, "Welcome to the 80s."
That's awesome.
That's funny. Those computers were substantial.
Oh, God.
Man, that first computer I had, they had to bring in, I think there was 2 guys brought it in to put it on my desk.
When I went to work
They were huge.
When I went to work for Beckham, he was showing me where he wanted me to up in the crow's nest to sit and listening to music. And I walked in, I looked to the right, and there was a Realistic 2 computer. It was like the first desktop computer, and that sucker was this wide and this tall.
Yeah.
And I was still in college, and I said, "Oh my God, Beckham, you have a Realistic 2 computer." And he goes, "Feischling, son, what are you talking about?" And I pointed at the thing, and he goes, "Oh, Carolyn bought that." And I said, "Well, Bob, that's cutting edge." And he said, "Son, that's what you call a fad."
Yep.
Couldn't always be right, could it?
Yep. No. Can't call them all.
That's funny.
Well,
I love it.
Blake, we're so elated that you could come and visit with us on
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Behind the Shed.
Behind the
today.
Shed.
And we know our viewers and listeners are going to really appreciate you and what you've talked about and what you've told us, and the interesting part of your life in the music business.
Well, thank you, Harold, for having me.
Yeah, man.
And thank you for teaching me a lot, buddy.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for tolerating me for all these years.
Thanks, man. That was great.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Today's episode was brought to you by Wild Bill's Fireworks, PopChevy.com, and the Kent Rose Foundation. This episode is also brought to you by TheForkEnd.com. Tune in next week to the music station, WWCC with Harold Shedd, broadcasting live from beautiful downtown Bremen, Georgia, 1440 on your radio dial. What you just heard just happened. Thank you for listening to Behind the Shed. We hope you enjoyed it. Tune in next week as we go Behind the Shed.